Most people think the hardest part of building wealth is making the first million. They're wrong. The hardest part is actually the first 5,000. Why? Because $5,000 is the exact point where you stop playing defense and start playing offense. It's what I call the 4% gap. Think about your bank account right now. For most, it's a transit station. Money comes in, stays for a coffee, and leaves for rent. You are living in survival mode. In this state, every broken tire or unexpected bill is a crisis. But the moment you hit that $5,000 mark, something psychological shifts. You aren't just not broke anymore. You have breathing room. Statistics show that 60% of people can't cover a $1,000 emergency. By hitting 5,000, you've already outpaced the majority. But it's not just about the cash. It's about the power dynamic. When you have zero, your boss owns your time and fear owns your decisions. When you have $5,000, you realize that for the first time in your life, you own a tiny piece of your future. This isn't just a number on a screen. It's the first brick in a wall that protects you from the world's chaos. Today, I'm going to show you why this specific amount is the tipping point where your brain stops worrying about how to eat and starts dreaming about how to grow. Let's look at the math of the 4% gap. The 4% gap isn't just a financial theory, it's a mental rewiring. Think of your brain like a computer running a heavy program. When you have zero savings, 90% of your mental CPU is dedicated to survival background tasks. You're constantly scanning for threats. Can I afford this grocery bill? What if the car breaks down? This is called scarcity brain. It actually lowers your IQ by several points because you're in a permanent state of low-level panic. But as you stack those dollars toward 5,000, those background tasks start closing one by one. Suddenly, you have excess mental energy. This is where the 4% gap begins to bridge. For the first time, you stop looking at the ground and start looking at the horizon. You transition from asking, how do I survive this month? To how do I leverage next year? Most people fail here because they treat 5,000 like a finish line. They think, I have $5,000, now I can buy that new phone or take that trip. That is a trap. In the survival stage, $5,000 is your shield. If you spend it, you drop your shield and walk back into the battlefield naked. The true power of this money isn't what it can buy you. It's the fact that it allows you to say no. No to a toxic boss, no to a bad deal, and no to a lifestyle that keeps you trapped. This is the growth phase, where your money starts protecting your time. There is a hidden tax on the poor that the wealthy never have to pay. It's called the lack of capital tax. When you have $0, everything is more expensive. You buy the cheap tires that wear out in a year instead of the good ones that last 5. You pay the late fees because the check didn't clear in time. You pay the highest interest rates because you're a risk. This is the survival trap. But at $5,000, you finally have the entry fee to escape this cycle. This is the moment you can afford to be patient. You can wait for the sale, buy in bulk, or choose the quality option that saves you money in the long run. This is the first time you are actually saving money by having money. However, here is the warning. This $5,000 level is the most dangerous place to be. It's the middle zone. You feel rich compared to where you were, but you are still one major disaster away from reset. The 4% gap refers to that thin margin of safety. If your cost of living is $4,000 a month and you have $5,000 saved, you aren't wealthy. You're just 30 days away from a crisis. The goal isn't to reach $5,000 and relax. The goal is to use the stability of that $5,000 to build the systems that lead to $50,000. Your brain is now out of panic mode. But if you get complacent, the survival trap is waiting to pull you back down. The 4% gap is a bridge, not a destination. Now, let's talk about the most underrated benefit of the 4% gap. Negotiating power. When you have nothing in the bank, you are a hostage. You have to accept the cost of living raise of 2%, even if you're doing the work of 3 people. Why? Because you can't afford to be unemployed for even a week. Your fear is your employer's greatest asset. But something strange happens. When you cross that $5,000 threshold, you develop what's known as walkaway power. This isn't about being arrogant or quitting your job on a whim. It's about the internal shift in your posture. When you sit down for a performance review, your brain knows that even if this goes south, you have 3 or 4 months of runway. That invisible safety net changes the tone of your voice. You become more direct. You ask for what you're worth. You stop saying yes to every soul-crushing project just to stay in your boss's good graces. Ironically, this makes you more valuable. Companies don't promote the desperate. They promote the confident. $5,000 is the minimum amount required to stop being a yes man. It is the price of your integrity. For the first time, you can afford to lose a job without losing your home. And when you aren't afraid of losing, you finally start winning. This is the stage where the progress tension peaks. You've seen the power. Now you have to protect it. Once you hit 5,000, a new enemy appears. The fear of loss. When you had nothing to lose. You were reckless because you were already at the bottom. But now you have a pile of cash, and your brain starts playing tricks on you. This is the psychology of control. You've built the wall, and now you're terrified of a single crack. This is where the 4% gap becomes a mental game. You'll start noticing every deal and every emergency seems to get louder. Your car makes a weird noise. Your phone battery seems a little slower, and suddenly, the world wants that $5,000 back. It's a test of your financial discipline. Are you actually in control? Or was that $5,000 just a lucky streak? Control isn't about hoarding every penny. It's about the ability to choose your sacrifices. In the survival stage, sacrifices were forced on you. Now they are strategic. You choose to skip the vacation not because you can't afford it, but because you value the freedom that money provides more than the experience the money buys. This is the bridge to the final level. If you can master the fear of losing this first 5K, you unlock the ability to invest it. You move from protecting your money to letting your money protect you. But first, you have to survive the lifestyle creep that kills 90% of people. At this exact stage, let's talk about the danger of the fake rich trap. Now we get to the part they don't teach you in school, the acceleration phase. The first, $5,000 is the hardest, because you are doing 100% of the work. Your money is just sitting there, lazy. But once you cross this threshold, you've built a financial seed. This is where the math of the 4% gap starts to work in your favor. When you have $5,000, you finally have enough capital to enter the markets that actually build wealth. You aren't just saving pennies, you're buying assets. Think of it this way. At zero, you are walking. At $5,000, you've just bought a bicycle. You're still doing the work, but every ounce of effort moves you 3 times further. This is where compound interest stops being a cool concept and becomes a physical reality. If you can keep that $5,000 base and add to it, the momentum shifts. Most people get stuck here because they don't see the needle moving fast enough. They see a 7% return on $5,000 and think, that's only $350, what's the point? The point isn't the $350. The point is that, for the first time in your life, you didn't have to trade your blood, sweat, or hours for that money. It was free energy generated by your past discipline. This is the transition from a worker to an owner. You are no longer just a person with a bank account. You are the CEO of a tiny, growing empire. And the empire is hungry for more. The truth is, $5,000 won't make you rich, but it will make you free enough to get rich. This is the 4% gap in action. It's the thin line between being a servant to your bills and being the master of your destiny. Most people will spend their entire lives on the wrong side of that line, blaming the economy, their boss, or their luck. But you now know the secret. The first 5,000 is the proof of concept. It proves that you have the discipline to delay gratification, the intelligence to ignore the fake rich traps, and the courage to take control of your time. If you can save 5,000, you can save 50,000. The math is exactly the same. The only difference is the number of zeros and the level of patience required. So, here is your mission. Stop looking at the mountain and start looking at the first brick. Don't worry about the $1 million portfolio yet. Just bridge the gap. Get to that first $5,000. Feel the weight of the shield in your hand. Hear the silence that comes when the survival noise finally stops. Because once you experience that freedom, once you realize that you are no longer a hostage to your next paycheck, you'll realize that the hardest part wasn't the money itself. The hardest part was simply deciding that you were worth the investment. And that decision is exactly why everything changes after you save your first $5,000.